The little independent record shops were a hub of... It's like the barbershop, it's like an alternative barbershop. We would be in there all day.
Everybody used to think the DJ was God, but actually often it was the person selling the DJ the record. Yeah. And then that made the DJ the God. And no one really credits these people.
Digging through the records and I want one of them, I want one of them, do you know what I mean? And just a vibe in there. You knew you was going to kind of be around like-minded people.
This would take somebody else a lifetime to know, you know that. The things that some people know about their music and about their records.
And if you got a wallet, it was going to be empty by the time you left. If you needed food, you needed to go to the food bank and ask them for some, because you wouldn't have any money left.
Without black music, there is no independent record stores, right? So it means everything to us, you know what I mean?
The independent record store. Not just a place to buy records, but something that plays a major part in introducing and curating new music to open ears, and with its roots eternally entwined with British black music. These stores have helped communities define, evolve, and celebrate their identities, providing memories of the past, staying close to grassroots of the current day black music, and holding a beacon to light the way into the future. Always one step ahead, independent record stores have stood alongside the black community in England for over 70 years, providing both the soundtrack to cultural changes that have taken place over the decades and also help drive them. These purveyors of vinyl hold so much more importance to community and culture than simply being a small business in an inner city alleyway or off the beaten track. And to look at the history of these stores is to see life through the lens of Black Britain. And although we cannot cover them all, this is a snapshot of what was happening up and down the country from DJs, collectors, and those behind the counter. I'm Simon Phillips, and this is the story of the record store and black music. England's Tastemakers.
Black record shops are a hub for musical family. It's a place, like a safe space. It's there for you to assimilate that culture and aspects of that culture and assimilate that music. Because that includes reggae, that includes soul, and that includes jazz, but it also gives you access to that family of people that are into that culture.
The internet didn't exist then. You couldn't go online and find out who was playing a club or whatever. You went to a record store to pick up your flyers. It was part of the cultural centre. It was really important. It was a meeting point for people pre-internet, pre-mobile phones.
It wasn't just like you go to a place and buy a record and that was it. It was a watering hole and a connectivity hub. So you got an education when you walked into a record store. It wasn't just like, give us £10 and that was it. You got an education. And I think that is a big thing that we're missing, that, you know, the meeting place, the watering hole and the discussion of the records and the artists and the fun.
The history of the independent record store can be traced back to the 1950s. Some of the first notable stores that led the way include the Discovery in Birmingham. Maurice Hunt opened its doors back in 1952, initially to reflect his love of jazz, but was soon serving rhythm and blues and imports to the local mods and growing Caribbean community. 1955 saw Dobell Records become a premier jazz store, ran by Doug Dobell, expressing his love for traditional jazz and rhythm and blues, on Charing Cross Road in London and later in Brighton. And Theo's Records in Brixton opened in 1959 as part of the West Indian Gazette. Theo Campbell arrived in the UK from Jamaica in the 1950s and set up the store for his fellow immigrants, stocking calypso and mento alongside US jazz and rhythm and blues. As the 1960s came around, Brian Harris, later becoming Mango Records in Handsworth in Birmingham, became a mainstay for black music for the Midlands. And Dave Godin's Soul City in Deptford in South London became the world's first exclusively soul music store outside of America and was instrumental in the development of the Northern Soul scene. And in parallel and in the north of the country, John Anderson in Glasgow at Soul Bowl Records was leading the charge for importing and distributing soul and jazz, and owned one of the most important mail order companies in the country.
In 1968, he shipped back 60,000 45s and started a mail order business. But in these big loads that he was bringing back were the future sort of R&B 45s, the modern soul 45s, the northern soul 45s, jazz albums and jazz 45s and things like that that people just couldn't get anywhere else. Record Corner in Balham, Bill Shannon down in Berkshire, lots of record dealers, smaller record dealers would come in and wholesale stuff from John. So these records were ending up in the cities and scenes were all forged from all this, you know.
Arriving in London from Jamaica in the 1960s, George Peckings Price was a key figure in changing the musical landscape. Peckings brought with him the music of his friend Clement Coxon Dodd's Studio One record label, introducing us to ska and rocksteady and setting off a chain of events that would later change the musical landscape. And music producer and music fanatic Sonny Roberts was also instrumental in furthering the presence of black music through his Planetone recording studio from 1961 to 1965. And in 1970 would open his Orbitone record store. And Peckings would open its doors on Askew Road in London in 1973. In the 70s, the network of specialist black music record stores was growing across England. But a lot of the places to buy records were still market stores, and where some of the stores we know today first started.
I met John in Peckings, and we got to become quite good friends. Then he opened up a stall in Clapham Junction. Just that little store, we had a little speaker at the back, and if it was raining, we'd knock the rain off of the tarpaulin and everything like that. But we used to be ram on a Saturday. People just come everywhere to buy tunes from us.
By the time I was in my late teens, I was selling records myself, and that's part and parcel of Soul to Soul, because I started with market stalls and stuff, and basically in the early selling doubles, and just like the T-shirts and so on and so forth, the music that reflected us.
Back in the mid-70s, I felt the urge to do retailing. I had a stall in Handsworth Market, and I was selling music then. I was lucky enough to get a job in the Bullring Market, a shop called Bailey's. We used to do quite a big percentage of the turnover in just reggae music.
These trailblazing inner city stores that specialised in black music were the backdrop and safe space against the culture of widespread racism. From Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech to National Front marches and race riots, the UK was making its way through a period of political and social turmoil as the 50s gave way to the 60s and 70s.
Our parents was not welcome to clubs and certain places to go, so they therefore set up their own club, which was house parties, blues, and obviously, you know, the vinyls that they used to bring over, they share amongst each other, and before you know it, they have their own community. We don't need to have a club, but so long as we have the sound and we got the music, we got the vinyls, we do our own thing, and I think that's where it progresses from to where we are now.
We was going through so much crap back then in terms of, you know, the struggle on the streets, the racism on the streets, you know what I mean? So, you know, one of our main outlets was music.
With the sounds of American soul and jazz from labels such as Motown, Stax, Columbia and Blue Note firmly in the mainstream, ska and rocksteady was becoming the sounds of the streets. Helped massively by the rise of the independent record stores and British labels such as R&B, Palmer, Blue Beat and Trojan leading the way, and was having a huge impact on the national charts.
67, 68 onwards to the early 70s, a lot of reggae records used to get in the charts. Big time for reggae, you know, because a lot of records, I think they used to say at the time, up to about 20-25% of the charts was reggae records. I mean, that might sound hard to believe, but that's how it was then.
And these records were played at the altar, known as the Gram.
The Caribbean community, 9 times out of 10, had the radiogram.
A blues spot if you were up there, or Blair Punt as it is formerly known.
The radiogram looked like a sideboard, and it had like the turntable in it with 33, 45, 78. You could stack the sevens on there.
This gram is kind of a unit. It was made out of a pseudo mahogany type wood. You know, you have MDF now, so whatever the equivalent would have been in, I guess, the 70s. And it was almost a centerpiece of furniture at home.
It was the thing that brought the family together. And yeah, it helped ease a lot of the kind of pressures of the times for the Caribbean community. And the records were integral to that.
Equally as important as the music in the 1970s was the way that we dressed. Fashion stood shoulder to shoulder with the music and was also a unique way of identifying with your tribe.
The way people dressed was really important in that time. You know, you had to have your big collars and your flares and your afro hair, and all this sort of thing was part of it.
When I was 16, it was tribal. Everyone dressed the way that for the music they represented. You go to a festival, all the kids look the same. You don't really know what they're into. We knew from just looking at, I knew a reggae boy, a soul boy, you know, a punk, a teddy boy, a ska boy, a rude boy, you know what I mean? Everybody had an identity. It was really important. I think working class people in general really strove for that identity, you know, and I think that's why the record shop, the little independent record shops were a hub of, it's like the barber shop, it's like an alternative barber shop. We would be in there all day.
The epicentre for black music in London in 1976 was Contempo Records. Contempo had been started at the turn of the decade by journalist John Abbey. The store, initially based on Hanway Street in central London, in partnership with Blues and Soul magazine, acting as a distributor and equipped with its own record label.
Contempo Records, I mean, that was the store. Then it kind of evolved from then to Tony Monson's shop, then the Kings Road, Flyover Records, Bluebird, and you know, the small little independent ones which came and went really, really quick.
And it wasn't long before Dub Vendor would make its move from the market to opening 2 major outlets.
79, we opened a shop up in Lubbock Grove. The first Dub Vendor was in the Shack. Record Shack was right by the tube station. And then in 80s, we opened, the early 80s, we opened up the Clapham Junction branch, which is it was a bigger branch down there. And I ended up managing that shop down there.
The early 80s also saw the first wave of black music pirate radio stations, with the Dread Broadcasting Corporation, JFM, Invicta and Horizon in London further fanning the flames and increasing the demand for black music. And with this newfound thirst, Groove Records came into being in 1981. Ran by Jean Palmer with her sons Tim and Chris, is widely considered one of the first of the new wave of independent record stores, leading the way.
Groove Records, I mean, Groove Records was the first sort of Soho shop that I used to go to, and was blown away by just everything, just sort of digging through the records and going, I want one of them, I want one of them, do you know what I mean? And just a vibe in there. You knew you was going to kind of be around like-minded people.
Groove Records in Soho, this shop was almost like a hive. It just attracted every DJ, everybody in London who wanted to collect music. If you were in there on Friday and Saturday, you would be start off probably outside the shop, listening to the music coming through the door. They had the hottest imports in town, and that was the place to go. And so the spill-off from that was in Manchester. That catalyst was Spinning Records.
For black music, there was only one place in Manchester back in the day, and that's Spinning. You just had to go there, because you wouldn't get it anywhere else. Eventually, places opened up like Robinson's Records, which was a wholesale place, but they brought in by the caseload all these old things that never sold in the States, and you could get really nice things there. But if you wanted up-to-date music, you went to Spinning. Spinning was the Contempo Records, shall we say, of Manchester.
Black music was thriving in England, but there were still cultural differences, racial tensions and clashes with the police. Such laws allowed officers to stop, search and potentially arrest so-called suspected persons. The fresh focus on these laws in the 1970s and 80s was disproportionately applying to black people and ethnic minorities. And a wide sense of injustice and alienation gave rise to the riots in inner city areas across the country.
In Brixton, the riot because of police brutality. And when Mrs. Gross got shot on Railton Road by the front line. So the tempers just grew and grew and grew, and that's what caused the big uproar with the riots.
But it was a really bad time in Manchester, and I think around about the same time they were having difficulties in Liverpool as well as parts of London. So it spread across the country. It wasn't a good time, I'll tell you that. It wasn't a good time.
As the community began to heal itself through music out of the ashes of the riots, black music and culture was now making its way into the mainstream and proved to be something of a unifying force.
People started to really take note of black music and black culture, starting with mods, pretty much, and skinheads, and the whole rock against racism, which was kind of a political thing, you know, because Leicester, again, was very notable in resisting and challenging and fighting the National Front at that time, because they had a bit of a foothold in Leicester. And so you got Asian people, you've got white people, and you've got African Caribbean second generation who were born here, as well as first generation, who are coming together in solidarity and in unity to fight that threat.
They used to have big punk bands like The Clash, and they used to record Police and Thieves. Rolling Stone did their version of Cherry Old Baby, which was a big original Jamaican song. You know, Billy Idol, you talk to someone like him, he's a punk man, right? And when you listen to Billy Idol and he talked, he likes roots music.
There's something unique about the vibe inside an independent record store, particularly those with a history of specialising in black music. Even today, there's a special feeling, a culture, a diverse tribe that come together with a shared love of new and fresh discoveries. And with a diverse collection of characters, there's a rare and wonderful madness in the air as well.
So it's one of those places you would always guarantee to bump into people, where you'd always feel at home, where you'd always swap stories, you always have a joke, you always sort out the next dance, or the next rave, or the next bit of club work, or do you understand, or the grapevine that we were part of.
And people would just be there all day, just talking with each other and just getting a feel of the whole atmosphere of everything. You know, the clubs, the music, the fashion, how everything fitted in. And, you know, for an aspiring DJ or a kid that wanted to get into the industry, it was the place to be, because that's where you would network. You would actually go and meet people, and you would go and talk to them. You would listen to what they were saying. You would listen to the guys in the store and their knowledge and what the music was that was being played, and people talking about things. We would have all the magazines there so people could look at the charts, and it was just like a connecting of everything.
And being in those places and asking about records, talking to other people who are buying tunes, or I'd sort of overhear conversations and I'd be intrigued.
You could always see somebody in there that you knew, always. You didn't plan to meet up. This is before all the mobile phones and the text and the messenger. You just walk in, oh, yes. Always knew somebody in there.
Same again, you were meeting people, I was meeting new people all the time, whether it be standing there talking about music in wherever, in such a small shop, you know, sort of standing there at the back going, me, yeah, I have one of them.
And it was like an auction. You play a tune, a man put his hands up, you fling it down on the counter, and you had to be quick, because tunes would sell really quick.
And then someone who you've never met before, who's in the shop, will go, actually, Graham, yeah, have you heard such and such? No. Oh, Nicky, put this on, he's good. If he likes this, he'll love that. And you find stuff that other people recommend to you.
Vinyl lovers are a special kind of breed. We live, breathe and talk records 24/7. And there's something obsessive about the behaviour and the rituals we display.
The Brits are fanatical, mate, especially you blokes. Jesus, God blimey. I mean, I see, being a music lover myself, I do love my music, but I tell you what, some people are absolute crazy about their music. This would take somebody else a lifetime to know, you know that? The things that some people know about their music and about their records.
I decided to log every one of my records in Discogs just for my own information, privately, not to sell them. And it racks up to 900,000 pounds high, 500 median, 230 low. And one of the problems I've got, and every other record collector's got, is how much of a problem am I going to leave my family with?
There were times where I was earning, 60, 70 quid a week and probably spending 80 quid a week on music. Had to have it. I don't know where I'd be without a Barclay card or whatever the other one was called at the time.
The excitement of that vinyl and looking for it and hunting for it was the smell of it, the covers, the artwork, the whole thing. As just someone who bought records before I was a DJ, it was just, exciting to do that. And you got that record and you touched it, you felt it. And still, when I'm flicking through the record box, every time I see the artwork of a record, the memory is straight there with the record.
I was very kind of geeky almost and would read the small print on the back of the records. At one point, I was so good, I could probably tell you who made the teas and coffees for that studio session of whichever artist that was. No, it was nuts. At one point, I was like that.
Only the US stuff came in sealed cellophane.
Yeah.
Okay. The only way to open it, if you're a DJ, is to rub the seal across the front of your jeans to break that seal.
If it was sealed, we had a special way of opening it. Had to wear your jeans, and the static, as you pulled it out of the slit, and it was in the paper, so you pulled it out, and there'd be that little bit of static there, and it would be new, it'd be perfect. There'd be no fingerprints on it. Honestly, it was like a love story.
Getting home, playing it, yes, get it out of the bag. The smell, it's like Christmas. Getting it out, isn't it? Get it out, yeah. Let's read the back. Who's it by? When was it done? Who's the distributor? Who's this? Who's that? All the information is there. You spend time reading it, about the label, about the producer, the remixes, everything. You spend time reading it.
People call it, what do they call it these days? When they call it opening, unboxing. It's the new way, it's the old way, but the new way of unboxing. You open something and you take the pleasure of taking your time and peeling the corners off just to open that product.
It's difficult for this generation to understand why there's a mad love affair with vinyl for older folk like me. Let me try and put a different perspective on it, right? So, obviously, I like girls. Not as much as I like vinyl, though. I realise this, and I'll tell you why. There's an album by Gilberto Gil. It's got a tune called Palco on it. I couldn't find it anywhere. And then one day, I looked in GIF's Records in Essex, I think it was. I said, oh, I want it. I've got to have it. How much is it? It meant I spent my train fare. I walked home from Essex to Hackney. I think it was 3 hours, maybe more. But I had this record under my arm. I was the proudest, happiest, tired, bunion blistered walking person you've ever met in your life. And when I got home, I played it. Still to this day, don't know a word. Would I have walked that far for my girlfriend?
A record store is nothing without its people. The experts, the clued up characters behind the counter who know their customers, as well as they know the cultural and artistic shifts taking place in the industry.
A lot of records would never got discovered if it hadn't been for the people behind the counter who kind of like, oh, this bit, because people behind the counter thought, oh, this person, this DJ is coming in today, I must let him or her listen to a copy and stuff like that. And usually they were right. So the record shop, the guardians in the record shops really had a fantastic ear for the music and the knowledge of their customers as well.
Everybody used to think the DJ was God, but actually often it was the person selling the DJ the record. And then that made the DJ the God. And no one really credits these people. They were behind the scenes. They, you know, most of them probably don't work in music now. They do other things, and they helped shape a generation.
If it wasn't for the person behind the counter knowing those records, the punters wouldn't have discovered those records. So there's records that a general person, when I say general, just a regular guy, I'm going, I don't know about that record. But you listening to the first 3 seconds, yes, that's a good record. I'm going to take 50 of those. Punter comes in, and all of a sudden 50 are gone because of your knowledge.
The only advantage you had on the HMV store, which was more computerised, was your knowledge. That's all you had, and your taste in music. The fact that if I came in, with, or when I stopped doing that job, someone else came in and he's got 10 tunes, you put them on, you've got 10 seconds, 30 seconds, pull it down, you've got to work out, is that going to pop, is that going to sell? You know, it'd take HMV a couple of weeks to work that out. You are the tastemaker of HMV.
Don't forget, in those days, you know, pre-internet, pre-Google, pre-Facebook, and I don't want to sound old, but you had to hear.
Yeah.
You had to hear sonically through a phone.
Yeah, so they'll play the tracks down the phone, the distribution, and you say, yeah, I want a couple of them, 5 of them.
And sometimes they'd fax you stuff, and you didn't know what you was buying. So if you wasn't very clever and didn't understand sonically what the music of the future would be, then we wouldn't be credible. So ultimately, these guys were senior A&R people.
The knowledge held by those people behind the record store counter who knew the industry inside out was, in turn, shaping the future of the wider music business.
One section of the industry that did develop and benefit from the information that was coming through record shops and people playing imported records was the British record industry. So you got, at that time, Capitol Records, you got RCA, you got all those major, CBS, you got all the majors in London who would benefit from this information and then start employing, in some cases, people from record shops or DJs or collectors to give them that edge to know which releases were breaking out, to know what was going to happen.
Up until this point, the record store had served a staple diet of imported black music. But by the mid-1980s, a seismic shift was happening, and it was a truly unique British movement. And once again, the record stores were at the forefront from behind the counter.
You know, the imports were great, but the Brit funk scene was starting to explode big time. Very, very talented musicians now used to shop in those shops, and they got their interest through, you know, listening to some of that great music and, you know, being influenced by it.
As Bluey from Incognito will tell you, the first time he heard an Earth, Wind & Fire record, or the first time he heard a BT Express record, that spurred him on to go and do his business. And Beggar & Co. and Light of the World, you know, because they were in a record shop listening to an import record.
There was a response in the UK with British Jazz Funk. There was a response in the UK with lots of bands. Sweet Sensation, The Real Thing, going on to High Tension. We had High Tension at the Ritz. You know, these were exciting times. And again, when that focus comes in, the record companies will get behind it, and that indirectly then puts records into shops.
With a steady stream of reggae from Jamaica since the 1960s, it was now time for the second and third generation children of the Windrush to make their own music. Cutting their teeth as entertainers on sound systems of the 1970s and early 80s, they were becoming artists in their own right and gave rise to the first wave of British MCs.
Oh, yeah, talk Smiley Culture, Macca B, Asha Senator, Tipper Irie. You have me, Tenafly, General Levy, Sweetie Irie, Starkey Wanton.
It was just phenomenal. It was a great era for the music as well.
You know, these record shops were not add-ons to the high street. They were extremely culturally important in moving this music forward.
The early 80s saw the first digital revolution, moving away from its analogue and instrument-based sound to drum machines and synthesizers, changing the way black music was being made and creating a brand new sound. And along with it, the early stages of hip-hop.
Because I remember 84 was when, around the time all the early hip-hop started appearing, all the early electro stuff like Johnson Crew and Africa Bambaataa, and then later you had like Big Daddy Kane, EPMD, Roxanne Shante, Eric B and Rakim, all that stuff. And Brian Selby didn't really want to stock it because he said no. But you see, as the other reason was, in Nottingham, you had a record shop that was just for black music, dance music, R&B music, and that was Arcade Records. Jonathan Woodliff, the great Jonathan Woodliff, I'd walk in there 3 times a week, lunch hour, and he'd go, yeah, Graham, got you these, and he'd just load me up with tunes that I would then take home. I wouldn't listen to them in selected discs because I'd get told off, but I'd get home from work, having listened to music all day, I'd then get home from work and play these new records and go, oh my God, these are amazing. And those were that was like all the hip hop stuff. And then latterly, from 86 onwards, all the kind of early Chicago, Detroit and New York house tracks. And then, you know, house kind of took over.
In January of 1987, Steve Silk Hurley's Jack Your Body became the first house record to top the UK charts. And while the UK streets were enjoying house music, strides were being made in politics when the first black members of Parliament were elected. Peter Lang, Bernie Grant, Paul Boateng and Diane Abbott would all take their seats in the Commons in June of that year. 1989 saw the second Summer of Love, and Soul to Soul's Back to Life was #1 on the national charts and became the first British R&B group to win a Grammy Award. But the group's hit was something of a pinnacle to a brand that had been years in the making, with its cultural and financial roots in the business of selling records.
Started out with us having the stalls, which moved on to this very curious gentleman called Maurice Bloom, who owned most of the properties here in Camden, who basically put us in 192 Camden High Street to stop squatters. We had stalls from here to Kensington to the Waste in Hackney. And then from there, the logo became very popular.
A guy called, I think it was Derek Yates, drew that funky dread head, and it became a T-shirt that Londoners were wearing, even if they didn't know who Soul to Soul were. It was such a strong black sort of image. It's unbelievably powerful, and they used it and started selling records, T-shirts, and kind of memorabilia for a sound system, which was literally unheard of.
We used to print our own T-shirts, we would print our own flyers, we made our own sound systems, we'd go and find our own venues.
I supplied him with a lot of tunes for the shop, you know, and eventually he opened the shop after they'd made records and were successful. He opened one in Tottenham Court Road, and I went into partnership with him for the record part of it, which, I mean, we never made any money. The margins were ridiculous, but it looked so good.
Like the Northern Soul all-nighters of the 70s, the 80s had found its feet with this new electronic music. New York, Chicago and Detroit house music was on the rise, alongside our emerging happy hardcore and rave scene that led to a radical change pretty much overnight. Acid house was here, there was a social revolution brewing that had the establishment terrified.
It was really radical. I mean, that movement, same as punk was in the 70s and whatever. It was a rebellion. People just were fed up with the formula, fed up being told what they should like, what was being played on the radio, what they were supposed to wear and whatever. And it was the youth rebelling, and it took hold of the whole country. I mean, remember the news reports on News at 10, like acid house is destroying, the youth and what is happening, the same as punk, the same as rock and roll. They were really exciting times because of that.
England had a real big rave culture. I don't know how that kind of panned out in the States so much, but it was just very fertile. And then what also happened is not only were we playing it, but we started licensing those records and making hits of them. They were big in the States for having made this music and for having created this vibe, this new culture. But we made the hits, and we made the club nights, and we made the brands.
Today, Latin music is commonplace on radio. but in the early 90s was limited to weekends or late-night specialist shows. And with the popularity of the music growing, a new wave of DJs, collectors and sound systems emerging, it was time to take matters into our own hands.
People wanted outlets to play their music because we couldn't get onto the BBC, we weren't getting onto Capital Radio. There's so many of us who like our music, are collecting music, buying music, going to record fairs, but we weren't going to get on these stations. So I can understand why there was a rampant expenditure of illicit, pirate radio stations.
The impact of pirate radio by now was undeniable. Black music was being broadcast 24/7 in an environment where much of the mainstream media at the time had all but ignored it. These radio stations, hand in hand with the independent record stores and our new club culture, would have a huge impact on the national charts and was starting to change the tide.
All of a sudden, there were many more shows, and so the demand for these songs was higher, right? Hip-hop particularly, and R&B in the early 90s just started going boom.
Every week I remember you being on the phone to the chart company and you would have a list of sales that would contribute towards the chart in the UK. And if you had a hot club record, they would appear in the charts out of nowhere, and then they would get picked up by the major labels.
Absolutely.
Because of the heat created by the network of record stores around the UK.
From those early days right up to the 1980s and 90s, the specialist black music stores also served as a platform for artists to be heard. And unlike today, when you can reach a worldwide audience with a click of a button via social media, the avenues and roads to entry were limited unless you were signed to a major label. In-store performances were vital for new talent to get in front of the record buying community. Sub, fronted by Melanie Williams, had a top 3 UK chart hit in 1993 with Ain't No Use.
Well, they could break your record at the time. I mean, they were the ones that were discovering the new music at the grassroots level. And so I went on all of these record tours all around the country, and it was amazing. You got up really early and you did as many stores in some of the round the back little dark alleyways, and it was so heartfelt, and I don't know what the equivalent of that is now.
The mid-90s saw an explosion of new artists, and once again, the record stores will be the first point of call. The communities that created the music, the pirate radio stations that played it, and the record shops that sold it all came together to create a unique ecosystem and a very special relationship.
Records were coming in there every day. Man was walking through that shop with records every day, and we got fed. The station got fed, and the record shop got fed, and that really, really became a real big thing.
One of them come to mind was Pato. I remember Pato Banton. He had a track called Hello Tosh, got a Toshiba. I don't know if you remember that one. It was a nice track, and obviously you will see it on a Don Christie label. Don would support somebody if they have that ambition and he knows them and they want to do something. He would put that back into the industry and say, go. And I think that record actually went done very well for Pato and for us in selling to be a #1 good seller.
Black music was on the rise, but racial tensions would strike again. In 1993, the murder of Stephen Lawrence in a racially motivated attack sparked a national campaign for racial equality. In those challenging times of division, black music and the coming together of communities once again provided valuable solace. In 1994, 5HQ is another black music store that broke the mould of its time. Like Contempo Records, they had their own label, Formation Records, and like Soul to Soul, their own clothing line. But 5HQ was the ultimate meeting place for the new club culture.
Once 5HQ started, that was an information centre, because everyone had a meeting point to come to. The amount of different people that came in that you would have never met. never connected to, you know what I mean? Saturdays was Ram, you know, we had all different people from all different lives.
So it was clothes, there was the records all behind the decks, then you had your tickets, and then you had your flyers at the bottom. And it was like, wow.
At that time, nobody had the operation we had in our music. Nobody. Because when I didn't realise at the time, do you know what I'm saying? And people was like, oh, what? You had that then? I'm like, yeah, we had a shop, we had the studios, we had that. So from the studio until it was sold to the customer, we was all in the mix. Studio, distribution, you know what I'm saying? Pressing, we was all in the mix, promotion. And because it was the information centre, that was the best part, I think, because we was in every part of the cycle.
The Criminal Justice and Public Order Act of 1994, introduced by the then Conservative government, sought to clamp down on rave parties and increase the penalties for so-called antisocial behaviours. Unsurprisingly, this sparked anger and demonstration amongst music fans. The rise of the new sound of the British youth and black music had made its first notable impact in the Houses of Parliament and house music as a whole. In the mid-90s, the rave scene was about to make its first significant change in its evolution.
Where it splintered off from the hardcore and got a little bit harder, and they started to incorporate reggae samples and things like that, is when we start coming into jungle.
Driven by Jamaican dancehall and reggae and sound system culture of the 80s, jungle began to emerge in 1992, and the record stores would once again be at the forefront of this new emerging sound.
I think there are a few key things that really help drive that jungle sound. The records we got for Pirate Radio Station from the record stores, you know, were instrumental in pushing that sound. And I got to say, like, the people working in the record stores were so knowledgeable, like your Ray Keith and Nicky Blackmarket and, you know, people like that, because they were pushing this sound hard, because nobody would know these records necessarily when you'd walked into the store. It would be Ray or Nicky going, you got to hear this tune, mate. It's absolutely brilliant. You got to hear it, you know.
Our DJ that was working for us on the jungle music was a DJ called DJ Shaxi. He used to love he was from Coventry, and he used to sell loads of it. And people used to always link him up on the phone, can I speak to Shaxi, please? And we know that this thing was building up a lot more. So that kept us going at Don Christie's for some time.
The British music baton was about to be passed from jungle in the mid-90s. UK Garage was making its way to the top of the musical table.
I think as a genre, it really paved the way for UK Garage, in that it really was for the streets, by the streets, and then people got a hold of its integrity and then just fell in love with it in the same way that UK Garage did. I think the songs and the vocals in UK Garage meant that it had a wider reach, but the fact that you had an underground sound that was able to go from very, very small clubs, that's how far that journey has gone. And yeah, I have so much respect for those guys.
Pre-social media and the digital service providers we know now, the record store was the place for independent artists to flourish, if prepared to manufacture their own music. And the record store would be the key route for distribution.
I got the records pressed and mastered from my brother and my dad, because they was at Music House. So I had the links to pressing plants and all that. So we put our money together, pressed up white labels, printed little labels to say what else, and then we had the records, stick them on there. And then we would go to a record shop and try and sell them. And you had a thing called SOR, Sale or Return. So I'll give the shop, say a box of 25 on SOR, and I'll come back in 2 weeks, and whatever they sold, they paid me for, and what they didn't sell, if they wanted to give them back, they give them back, or they keep them, and then I come back a week later to get the rest of the money. But that's how it all started, you know, us out the back of our car.
The British producer innovation continued to break new subgenres, and in 1997, Broken Beat was bubbling on the underground, fusing jazz, jungle, reggae, Latin, R&B and hip-hop into a melting pot reflecting a new generation. And the record store was key to the success of this new sound.
Back in the days when we used to do the broken beat thing, we always used to supply, we'd actually press up, you know, probably like twice the amount of white labels that we used to do for promo to go out to the DJs, because then you'd have the early punters, stroke, budding DJ who's already out on the circuit that needs that surfacing, that's going to promote that sound. So getting that to the record stores where they can get that quite quickly around the same sort of time as the magazines and the promo DJs are getting that, you know, it sort of works hand in hand. So they're really important. It's a very close and much needed connection.
So we've heard about the vibe, the people and the record store's importance, but what do our leading record store owners and DJs think are the most important record stores from over the years?
But in Manchester, so we had Ralph's, we had Spinning,
Piccadilly Records, wherever I could get the vinyl from, second-hand shops, Corn Exchange in Manchester.
Hot Wax, which was Kev Edwards. He used to run that shop. That was another good. Kev used to work at Spinning, in fact, and then obviously went on to do his own shop. That's Expansion Records as well. That was the key one.
Expansion, which is Richard's shop, that definitely became up there in the top 3 record shops in town.
Eastern Bloc Records.
Yanks.
Yeah, it's Yanks behind them.
Yeah, Yanks. They used to do all American import cutouts, and that's where I found a lot of jazz albums in there.
Vinyl Exchange, they're still going today, Vinyl Exchange. And Fat City Records.
Yeah, they came in.
They came along.
There was a shop in Athlete's Palace called Fat City Records, and they gave me my own department in the shop, which I called One Way Records, and it was fantastic.
We opened up our own record shop as well, Slam Jams Records.
I think Expansion in Manchester, Record Corner in Balham.
One of the most important shops of all, apart from Consempo, at Hanway Street, was Record Corner in Balham. Now, Record Corner themselves distributed and wholesaled and made records, but it also had a very valuable record shop as well.
When I first started DJing, I was playing soulful house music, and I used to go Black Market, and Rap Saunders would deal with me, and I would come in and Rap would know exactly what's up my street.
Black Market Records, I think, probably was the one I spent the most time in. City Sounds, definitely. I remember meeting DJ Hype in City Sounds.
City Sounds I grew to love because I loved Dave Silby behind the counter.
City Sounds, Dave Silby, absolutely. I was a disciple of Bluebird. There was Goldhawk. I spoke about All Ears. I used to pop up to Red to have a look at what was going on there.
I've got to give an honourable mention to Jiffs, which was in Chadwell Heath in Essex. You know, George and Lynn. You know, they were beautiful people, a lovely sort of husband and wife couple that had a jazz funk store.
Reading Records at Clapham Junction, just on the cusp of Lavender Hill. Red Records as well.
Getting records from Tony's Records shop in Finsbury Park to Ryan Pepe's store, Quaff Records.
Desmond Hip City. Then you had Soprano B's record shop off of Cold Harbour Lane.
West London would have been Hawkeye Records. That was very important because I remember the likes of Daddy Ernie at the time used to work at Hawkeye Records. And across the road you had Starlight and would go to Jetstar.
Yeah, Jetstar, very important to all of us in Britain. Part of all the stuff that even when I was running my shops and record stores, when we were just breaking, you know.
I used to buy mail order from Daddy Cool's in Dean Street, which was a shop that we later
owned.
Yes.
More or less, yeah.
Yes.
The vendor, even Blacker Dread down in Brixton, got the Daddy Cool.
You have Super Tone, you have Blacker Dread Records, you have Red Records, Body Music.
Bluebird, City Sounds, Soul Bowl Records.
Bluebird on a Sunday, me and he just used to go and Nick and Black Market Records for all type of music, drum and bass, jungle.
And there was a couple of record shops. There was one on North End Road near me. I used to go there all the time. Landlords. He used to have all the import 12s, all the hip hop import 12s, Reckless Records, all on that kind of Berwick Street run. Reckless Records, Selected Disc.
Red, Uptown, Deal Real, one at Lexington Street, Wild Pitch as well. There were loads.
Wild Pitch, Major Flavours.
Major Flavours. Ronnie, it's another Ronnie, wasn't it? It was another Ronnie. Major Flavours. I've got to give him a big shout because he used to, for my shop, I used to buy wholesale off him because those records weren't reaching North West.
On the house side, one of the first shops really to get me in was a shop called Catch a Groove. Now later on, a lot of the guys there went to another shop, just Windmill Street, just off Piccadilly, released the Groove.
Release the Groove with Gary Dillon, which then also became Release the Pressure as well, with Ricky Morrison and Jeremy Newell, these guys who I met along the way.
Catch a Groove to Release the Groove were my two main shops in town. Mikey used to go to City Sounds in Holborn, but he also used to shop at Rhythm Division in East London.
When I used to go to Leicester, for example, you used to have Hurdle White and Ainley's.
Well Records, which was on London Road. Steve there, I think Steve, yeah. They went on to do the VIP record fairs. They were massive. There was Graham and them lot at BPM. And then there was Sneakers and obviously Too Funky. Yeah.
Too Funky was a shop that were rivals to us because they had everything that we had. And we were like, Too Funky. I mean, listen, we got on and we still got on now. VJ, I love him. And there was that healthy rivalry.
Mange and Alps and Jason. Steps Ahead, which sourced our music, which was soul, jazz, funk, new and second-hand. And it basically became a hub for the East Midlands.
I think the main one for me has got to be Revolver Records.
Revolver got all the imports, whereas Ainley's, or Ainsley's as they call it, or even Breeze on Churchgate, all the UK stuff was in there.
Going into town, or getting in the car and driving to Arcade Records, or driving to Pure Records in Birmingham, or the Depot in Birmingham.
In Birmingham, you've got the Discovery, you've got Jazz and Swing, you've got Graham Moore on the Oasis.
Don Christie's, you got Tempest Records, Ruby Red Records, and Hard to Find was my number one.
So Summit Records for me was the place, and it was on the corner of Temple Street, and that's where I met Frenchie.
Black Wax, because he had two shops that I knew of, who, one in Erdington, one in Handsworth, Tempest Records, down by Dale End.
When we started our shop, Punch Records, we were the children of other stores, Don Christie's and Summit.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you want to go further, Black Vinyl on Lascelles Road. Those were the shops. So we are the children. So we owe our lives and we owe our lives to those people who ran those shops. We want to say thank you to Cameron.
Black music's influence had largely gone unnoticed by the mainstream until the late 1990s, but was now and finally being recognised as the driving, innovative force that it was and is. And leading the charge, one pioneering record store was to change the face and expectation of black music and provide the ultimate home for British artists, combining the heritage of the past, the best bits of the legacy stores to showcase the emerging hip-hop and UK rap scene.
Late 80s, very early 90s, there were some big artists, Cookie Crew and Demon Boys, Derek B was, in the charts. And by the time we, I'm saying late 90s, early 2000s, by the time we were doing our thing, the wealth of UK artists spitting in a UK twang, talking about their UK London experience, it was just unbelievable. But yet, as far as the industry was concerned, it felt like people weren't taking the artists seriously. So that was the sort of backdrop. So for us, it was about, okay, well, look, as part of your launch, come and launch it out of Deal Real. Do a live performance, sign some records. You use all your promotional outlets to bring as many people as you can. We'll do the same, put the word out, make a big deal out of it. Because at the end of the day, for us, it was about breaking that sort of that perception you know, and trying to level the playing field, you know, for the artists that we love and respect, and just being a bit of a platform, you know, for them to actually transact, you know, and build their audience a little bit more and engage with their audience. And then afterwards, we'd then hold an open mic. So the word just spread, and yeah, it just got to the stage where the shop would be packed every single Friday without fail. From the counter to the back window, it'd be packed. And then we'd have these big windows, and then it'd be packed outside, people outside looking in as well.
Following on from the rise of jungle and UK garage in the 90s, there was another gear change in the evolution of British music. And there was one store that was the centre point and something of a mecca for record buyers.
Well, I mean, Rhythm Division, it was in the heart of East London on Roman Road. And that record shop, even though it was massive for UK garage, it was massive for underground UK music, because that effectively was where grime was first sold, first bought. If you speak to, you know, DJ Target, the legendary One Extra Radio 1 DJ, he will tell you about going in there as a youngster and being really shy and standing at the back and, you know, and starting his record collection in Rhythm Division. And UK garage DJs like, I think Daniel Ward worked in there, Hermit would always be in there, Daryl B would always be in there. So these are people are, you know, legendary names to do with UK garage. That's where they would go. So yeah, you can't really speak enough about the importance of a shop like Rhythm Division, yeah.
Every scene has that records shop that, you know, or that place, do you know what I mean, that is the mecca of that scene. For that grime scene, for that scene, for that maelstrom, for that energy, it was all about Rhythm Division. All the aspiring MCs, that's the spot. It's almost like once you've got your music up in there, you've arrived.
As the noughties dawned, black music was the new pop. Its presence was being felt like never before, and the music that was once specialist only now reigned supreme. It felt like the independent record stores were unstoppable. But there was trouble ahead.
Slowly but surely, independent record stores started losing out to the HMVs of this world that started stocking imports. Because I remember when it happened, all of a sudden, they had every section in the world. Because I'd go to HMV, they'd have every section possible, but never, we go to import section, nah, it's not happening. Nah, that's not happening. And then one day I walked in, I went, it's happening.
The high street chains were now taking notice and wanted in. And the independent record stores were about to be sideswiped. Twice. Not only were more outlets stocking our music, but the rise of the CD single as a new format was starting to have an impact.
A lot of the supermarkets were now stocking what we were selling. And obviously, when they were coming out beforehand on import, you'd get that little period of maybe 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever you had that little window to sell enough to not lose money and to make a profit and not get stuck with product. But then when they started doing these singles and releasing it simultaneously, UK and US, it was a killer. Because all of a sudden, this import 12 that you're selling for $6.99, they can get it for $1.99 in Tesco's and wherever, do you know what I mean? So it completely flipped on its head.
You had your die-hard followers who would still come in and buy their vinyl because they wanted to play vinyl only. But CDs started to take over. And then sales started to dwindle and dwindle and dwindle.
So far, the battle had at least been physical, vinyl, cassettes and CDs. They were all formats that you could hold in your hand or pay to receive them in the mail. But there was a new technology around the corner that would consume the music industry in ways none of us saw coming.
In a sense, the record industry had created its own problem because the success of CDs in the 80s really allowed those digital files to be available. They wouldn't have been there. I mean, as you know, making a digital file of a piece of vinyl is quite challenging, isn't it? Making a digital file of a CD, well, somebody like Sean Fanning in the States, who basically founded it and set up Napster, working later with Sean Parker, it's kind of like it was you know, a no-brainer in a way. And once the internet got a little bit more lively and you could actually get a bit more bandwidth of it, it made a bit more sense. But I think people will remember that it used to take years to download a track, even with the wonderfulness of Napster. But the problem is, the genie was out the bottle, wasn't it? And people, even if, as I say, Napster had gone, and even if you get rid of LimeWire, people were doing their own digital file sharing and that sort of thing. So once that had begun, there was no way to stop it, and there is no way to stop it, obviously, now.
With the likes of HMV and their immense buying power now feeling the pressure, the independent record stores were now facing the first of two battles to stay relevant and solvent. The major high street chains might have had their way in the first fight, but help was on the way from a new source, albeit illegal.
These independent record shops started selling a lot of bootlegs. And that's what kept them afloat, I think. Bootleg culture went nuts. I mean, they were doing compilation, bootlegs, 12-inch boot, and you felt you had to buy them because you might be missing something. They put a little loop at the front to distinguish it from something else to help DJs mix. And all of a sudden, you go into these independent record stores and the top 10 12-inch singles are all bootlegs.
There was a label called AV8, and we had these things called Lethal Weapons, and HMV didn't care. They were buying these records in. We used to buy them in for like £7-8 a pop and have to sell them for $12.99 once the taxes added on to make any money. Someone with a lot of savvy had got into HMV, who had contacts as well, and started kind of undercutting us. And that was the decline, and not just us, but a lot of the independent stores in the West End as well.
So it was a bit the Wild Wild West in independent stores. It was, I mean, we're talking about something illegal here, but it was going on. The fact is, it was going on, and they were doing it to survive, a lot of them. Some of them were making money, but the truth is, the writing was on the wall for a lot of them, way off, you could see it.
But the independent record stores weren't going down without a fight.
But the difference with the independent record store, and the reason they kept afloat, they could push out white labels. And record companies, as the popularity of the music became bigger and bigger, and every major record label then had a dedicated black music label, which they didn't used to have. Then they'd release these records, and I got a job at EMI in the early 90s, and my job was club promotions. So my job was to service DJs like yourself around the country. And obviously I'd get 1,000 white labels pressed. There were only 300 key DJs on my mailing list because it's not a dance record. That leaves me with 700 promos. What am I going to do with them? I'll give them to a record shop. Independent records, Tastemaker record shops. I know they'd sell them, but so what? I didn't sell them to them, but I'd give them a box each. And for them, that's like, wow, I've got a tune that's not released, not out for 4 weeks. I'm relevant. HMV can't do that. They can't sell white labels.
While the mainstream was having a hard time with the changes in technology and the industry, the purist collectors and crate-digging independent record stores stayed afloat and were thriving, staying true to their specialist roots. With the popularity of second-hand 45s and albums proving that despite the mainstream view, vinyl was alive and kicking.
But remember, no one was buying CDs for buying 7-inch reggae, or no one was buying their Northern Soul on CD, were they? But it's what is spun to people, isn't it? You buy this now and you buy this now. But really and truly, the people that were buying records were never stopped. I never stopped. I bought a few CDs, but I never stopped buying vinyl. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that didn't.
The digital era was now in full swing, with the scrappy illegal download sites morphing into the world of iPods and MP3 players. With iTunes launching its player in January of 2001, and the first iPod hit the market in 2002. Despite the lifeline that white labels and bootlegs have brought to the independent record stores, physical had become less relevant and outdated in this new digital world. And there was a seismic shift happening for the DJ too.
I think that had a lot to do with it as well. The format had changed. And it was now not interesting to carry 23k of vinyl when you could carry 10k of CDs that you couldn't read in the dark. But, you know, yeah, it changed, you know, that there was a sea change coming, and it was technology, it was format, it was just our own desires to play vinyl. I mean, that took a hit.
And then the next thing I know, that after all that, the CDs were going out because they can get them online. And to be honest with you, you could see where the trail of that now leads to shops no longer existence.
This was now really starting to affect the remaining independent record stores and the wider music industry.
Napster came along and the internet came along, and people were no longer paying for music. People were no longer going into record stores. They could listen to records, you know, maybe not their entire collections on their phones, but they could listen to some music on their phones. And it radically changed the whole economics of the whole industry. But it was really, really sad, because people that had legitimate businesses, that were friends of mine, people that I still speak to now, so that's how deep-rooted the community was. They all went out of business, and their livelihood suffered, and people really, really struggled. And it was a sad moment, you know.
It was visceral. Things were definitely crumbling. As far as the sale of physical music was definitely crumbling around us. And I remember having a couple of good conversations with people like, you know, Digger from Wild Pitch, who was around the corner. I'd be like, Digger, man, where is everybody? Where are all the customers? And he was like, listen, you just have to keep your margins really tight, because, you know, things are drying up.
2006, 2007, we were noticing the whole digital thing was coming in, Serato, and vinyl DJs were kind of dropping, and sales were dropping, everything was kind of dropping. And I think I noticed 2007, shops started closing down, and I was always like, we're not going to close, we just ride it out. And it was only because we had a little fire in the shop. It was only a tiny fire, but we had to close down for a few weeks because of, you know, just health and safety and stuff. And that was the point. I was like, you know what, let's just call it a day.
So we've ended up closing down the two shops. The first one was in Ladbroke Grove, which was in 2011, I believe. And then we closed the one in Clapham Junction about 5 years later. It just, again, wasn't working. One person coming in. Or people, it was got to the point with, like I said, with the download, people go, oh, what's the name of that record? He goes, da, 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 da. And you go, oh yeah, I've got it here. It's called Hypnosis by Russ Davies. Okay, thank you. And they'd walk out the door because they're going to download it.
And in 2010, a lot of the legacy independent record stores had closed, with the vast majority of music now being consumed online, and with the launch of the iPhone in 2007, drastically changed the way music was consumed and was the final nail for the independent record store. But it wasn't the end of the story for the record itself, who, despite losing its crown as the leading medium for music, retained its value for the purists and gained a whole new role in this new digital era.
I think now there's a definite demand for it and there's a coolness to it, but I think it's a part of merchandising rather than actually playing the tunes. Digital has replaced so many things. You're not even playing out as a DJ. You're playing digital files, aren't you, now on the whole? And people I know still, the more purists will play the vinyl. That's really cool. But that'll coexist and that will carry on. And I think the vinyl is now re-established itself, and alongside T-shirts and that sort of thing, I think vinyl and albums are really important.
Record players have gone up and the sale of vinyl's gone up because they're tired of old farts like us talking about this and how much we're connected to it and how we loved it and how we cherish it, and we look at the artwork and the credits mean something. And I think there's an alternative, a small amount, but an alternative set of young people who are going to keep it alive forever.
You know, the thing is about digital, it's there forever. It's accessible. Anyone can have it. Everybody can own it. Whereas vinyl, if you've got the 7-inch or the 12-inch, I think that gives you bragging rights. I think that's really important to people. By nature, if something is really personal to you, you want to collect it, you want to show it off. I mean, Instagram is just about showing off, yeah? It's just like, I'm on holiday, I've got a new car, I'm having a great meal, etc. Well, music's equally important, and if you collect music, you're shouting about the records that you own.
In 2008, the first Record Store Day took place. Every year, over 270 record shops come together to celebrate this unique culture, along with the support of the wider music industry, with its exclusive limited edition vinyl, new music, and re-releases. As with most things in the 21st century, most business is conducted online. But independent record stores are seeing increased footfall, some people returning after years away, alongside new punters with no previous experience enjoying the art of crate digging. And in 2024, Record Store Day raised nearly £10 million in revenue. So we're now in the age of the last of the vinyl Mohicans. Vinyl is on the rise, new players are on the scene, existing outfits are making a living, and there's a new thirst and excitement for this classic black gold.
There are some places in London where it's all about the vinyl. People go and meet, and what's that place in Atlas and Sounds of the Universe, and all them places are still vibey places. Honest John's.
Crazy Beat, Gary Dennis at Crazy Beat, and his store, which is a very important store, and Fish at Simply Soul. Those two guys.
Piccadilly Records in Manchester, Vinyl Exchange, which keeps the spirit of Manchester Underground alive because Ross is involved.
Reckless Records still there. Love Vinyl is a great record shop that's in kind of like, the city.
Obviously, I'm going to mention Love Vinyl. So my dear friends, Zaf and Jake, run, which is not too far from here. And I think there's the important ones locally, Stranger Than Paradise, Rough Trade, Pure Vinyl in Brixton, and places like Juno and stuff like that, who, collectively are all making sure that there's still, the records are arriving and being delivered to people, even if they can't get to them. And just keeping the culture alive, because a good part of London's identity has always been the music.
Owned by DJs and music fanatics Jake Holloway and Zaf Chowdhury, Love Vinyl in the heart of East London is a leading tastemaker record store for upfront and new electronic black music, soul, funk and new jazz, and has become a cultural hub for record buyers and independent artists.
We're just an organic shop doing our thing. We get amazing records in here every single day. We like to buy from labels directly or artists directly. We don't store a great deal of new stuff, but the stuff that we do, we believe in. Without black music, there is no independent record stores, man. Not any good ones anyway, so it means everything to us, you know what I mean?
Still together since their time at Clapham Market, Dub Vendor remains one of the most respected names in British reggae music. Founded by Chris Lane and John McGillivray, now an online retailer, their defiance and tenacity continues to this day, and they're still very much at the top of their game.
So we do a little mail order now, and we post stuff out to people who still buy vinyl. We do a few CDs, but it's mainly 99% vinyl that we sell. And then what we do, we've got a little booth around the corner there, which we created, and we do live videos. So this is the latest tune, and we send them out on Instagram, and that's really good. So that's like a record shop sort of style. So you're introducing people to something, and they can hear it and go, oh yeah, we'll have that. So that really helps.
Owned by Claudia Wilson, Pure Vinyl still remains the heartbeat of Brixton's burgeoning black music scene and an important part of the record buying community.
I love going to live gigs, I love going to hear what people are putting out, and I just want to support that within what I have, because it's about making a community show what we have. This is what we have. This is what Black Britain is about, and we've got to be proud of that. We've got to be so happy and proud of that, because we've developed. We have come a long way, I think. I love it.
Originally opened as a record label in 1996, BBE Store is one of the most talked about destinations in Europe and has one of the most unique shopping and performance experiences, all based around records.
I guess the best way to describe what it has become now is like a lounge, sort of community centre for like-minded people, but essentially, you know, our own space to promote our releases and engage other people who want to or share in the passion that we have. And then, you know, I've invested a lot of money into the sound in the space too as well. So, you know, you come in here, you can have a wager that, you know, sound better than 90% of people's home hi-fi systems, and maybe even a few clubs. And it's nice to have a small venue. 50, 60, 70 people can come and enjoy themselves and show some appreciation for the hard work that the artists put into the music.
No longer in the business of selling records, but Too Funky is still at the forefront of the black music scene in Leicester, shaping the city's soundscape through its rich history of the past and diversifying and paving the road ahead with its roots of the record store as its foundation.
But whilst I had the shop, I was setting up stuff like the Too Funky comedy jams, Too Funky arts. So we were already using that brand to push other areas. So by the time the shop closed, Too Funky Arts was already up and running. Why not capitalise on it? So since then, you know, Radio Too Funky, the Too Funky Complex, venues we run, you do a lot of live stuff from local open mics right through to the international touring acts. So we kind of continued after that with the same brand, but obviously branching out into different areas.
And after 50 years in business, Birmingham's Summit Records continues to trade, diversifying the business where needed to ensure the vinyl roots survive.
It's sad that the music people don't come to support the shops like they used to, but I'm not going to let that deter me. I just find ways of being able to continue, which is what we're actively doing as we speak, you know.
In 2021, pioneering music producer Sonny Roberts was honoured with the Blue Plaque at his Cambridge Road site for his contribution to music through his Planetone Records and the Orbitone Record Store. And in 2022, Peckings was recognised with the Blue Plaque, marking its importance as a black-owned and run business in Shepherd's Bush, as well as its immense contribution to black music. And still going strong and making it the second oldest independent record store in England, the Discovery in Birmingham is still open for business. Without the independent record store, black music would not have had its voice and melodies heard in the wider community. And as small as some of them may have been, collectively, they have all played a huge part in not only the success of black music and culture for the community, but the music industry as a whole. And what started out for most as just love for the music has now contributed to some of the most important social and historical changes throughout the decades. From the race relation acts at a government level through grassroots anti-racism initiatives, right through to being a platform for independent artists and creating new and innovative subgenres. Without the independent record stores and its early pioneers such as Peckings and Orbitone Records, there might not have been a ska movement. No Soul City, Groove Records, Hot Wax, Spinning or Bluebird, no UK soul scene. Without Black Market, 5HQ, no jungle or drum and bass. And Deal Real and Rhythm Division, no UK rap or grime scene. The contribution and the impact of the independent record store is immeasurable, not only for black music, but the wider music industry, developing a rich musical history of which the country and its creators can be proud of.
First of all, it just has to be said that we have changed culturally the face of this country from when even before Windrush actually, you know, jazz music was propagated mainly by Africans and Caribbeans in this country even before Windrush. So when we get to Windrush and after, we have changed the face of this country culturally. We've made this country incredibly cool in terms of our cultural contribution. And that is a great gift to upcoming musicians now and in the future, not just here in Britain, but for the world.
Now, we mustn't forget the importance of the small independents in the UK, how much they seed the majors and influence them, but they still need to be, we still need to support them. Incredible. If I name one, I've got to name all, so but they know who they are. It's just the incredible people that are working and making this essentially black music is, and I'll say without the quotes, black music, because it's important. It's important. It's who we are. And end of.